Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more relationship stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting a like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. Let's crack on with today's first story, which comes from ImagineryNet2379 and asks, would I be the a-hole for suing my daughter-in-law? Our son and daughter-in-law, 26-year-old, have been together for 2 years and live together. We've always thought she's a very nice girl and she seems to make my son happy, so no problem for us. Our son has his own law firm that he's currently trying to get started. We're very proud of him and we're fortunate enough to help him with a startup loan. Daughter-in-law works a retail job that she's very happy with. Some time ago, husband and I were over at their apartment and we decided to order some food. Husband and I wanted to pay, and since daughter-in-law were ordering from the phone, we gave her our card so she could draw the money from our account. We thought it goes without saying this was to draw an amount once for the lunch. However, daughter-in-law apparently put our card into her Apple Pay and has been using it since. We didn't notice for some months, but recently saw withdrawals we didn't recognize. We had our accountant look into it and discovered that 1, daughter-in-law had been using our card on her phone, and that 2, she has spent around $17,000. We were quite shocked and called her up and asked why the hell she's been using our card. She got very defensive, tries to deny it, and eventually said she was entitled to it. And why do we care since we haven't noticed her use it over 4 months? We told her she needed to pay us back immediately or would report her actions for theft. She apparently doesn't have the money to pay us back. We've gone to our son and he offered to pay us back even though he actually cannot afford to. This isn't about the money for us, but more about the fact that she's stolen a huge amount of money. While we are comfortable, and it took us time to notice, we still recognize the seriousness of stealing 17,000 USD. Our son has completely dismissed her behavior and excused it as her being stressed. She's taken no responsibility and we're honestly wanting to go forward with a police report to teach her consequences to her actions. Would we be the a-holes for doing this? Now, absolutely not the a-hole for wanting to sue someone stealing from you, and the defensiveness and saying that she's entitled to it. What is that about? We've read many stories in the past where a large amount of money has been stolen, and usually when they're confronted they break down and say some stuff, and it usually comes down to some sort of compulsive behavior or addiction or something like that. Obviously, I'm not excusing the behavior and I'm not saying that's the case in this particular situation, but to turn around to someone and say, I'm entitled to it, and why do you care since you haven't noticed anyway? I mean, wow. But the fact that your son is completely dismissed it doesn't really seem, from what I can tell in the story, shocked at all. I'm wondering what is going on, and I'm hoping we're going to find out in the update as well. Some relevant comments to the story. So someone said to give her one more chance to fess up because they might go after her son. Then says this was also our thought. However, she has no savings and doesn't make a lot of money. If we demand she pay us back, the money will be coming from our son. We gave him the money to start his new company, and making him pay us back kind of defeats the purpose. Daughter-in-law has showed no remorse and is offended we are mad. Also, they aren't married, referring to her as daughter-in-law is just easier, so it wouldn't have any legal consequences for our son. Someone asked, what did she spend it on? Our accountant gave us a debrief. She was mostly spending it on big lunch/dinner outings, new clothes, jewelry and handbags. Our son wasn't aware as far as we knew and seemed shocked when we told him. I don't know what changed, but he's taken her side afterwards and they haven't been very communicative since. We've tried reaching out. But before we do move on to the update, let's cover a couple of comments. One from Perky Lurky who says, not the a-hole, here's your unhappy situation. You can either get the police involved, go nuclear, hope for a felony conviction, hope your son wakes up with a humiliation and you save him, or wait the 10 years or so before your son comes to his senses and they get divorced after 2 children and a mortgage, financially ruining your son for the next 20 years. Those are your 2 choices. Either go nuclear and fight like hell for him to wake the F up, or let it go and be prepared for his ultimate ruination in 10 years. Personally, I would try everything in my power to save my son, even if it meant I could fail, and he wouldn't talk to me for 10 years. It's what parents do for their children. We try to save them. Sometimes it means we need to run into a burning building. So sorry. Dirty Rotten says, so she committed fraud and stole from you, and your son, who wants to be a lawyer, is defending her actions. Not the a-hole. I would sue in a heartbeat, and your son needs to open his eyes and close his zipper. Crazy Banshee says not the a-hole. She stole 17,000 from you. It's mind-blowing that your son didn't break up with her immediately over this. She has demonstrated an inexcusable lack of integrity here. Your son should be outraged. Amanda says not the a-hole. Theft is not tolerable. File a police report. Make a claim with your credit card company. Let the authorities handle it. I see a lot of comments about how this will drive a wedge between you and your son. If she's willing to steal from you, what other crimes is she willing to commit? As an officer of the court, he needs to seriously reconsider this relationship now before he ends up in legal trouble himself because of her. So then OP goes on to update the post, which says, "Thank you for all of your feedback. I got many requests for an update, so here goes. We were utter and completely shocked with our son's nonchalant way of handling this, an utter loss. We desperately wanted to fight for our son, but since initial confrontation, he had been avoiding us. We decided we would take the advice and call the police to press charges. However, we wanted to let our son know before doing so. Husband and I decided to show up at his office since he had been ignoring our calls and texts. I know this might sound boundary crossing to some, but we desperately want to talk to our son. Initially, he got angry and asked us to leave, but he calmed down and agreed to hear us out. We told him our side of the story, and to say the least, he was shocked. He apologized profusely, cried a little, and begged for forgiveness. He told us he was blinded by love, working 14 hours a day and under the impression we had gifted his girlfriend the money. His girlfriend had apparently told him that we wanted to spoil her as our future daughter-in-law, and that we gave her carte blanche to buy herself nice things as a way to welcome her to the family, and that we'd since changed our minds on spoiling her and now wanted all the money back knowing she can't afford it. She had told him we did that as a manipulative way to force her out of his life, to try and control him. He was also under the impression she spent maybe 3 to 5k and not 17k. He was livid and was actually the one who in the end convinced us to pursue legal action. He actually helped us call the police right then and there at his office after our talk. We then went with him home and helped him pack up all of her stuff before she came home. She wasn't on the lease, living rent-free, so kicking her out was no issue. We offered to stay with him for the blow-up, but he wanted to handle it on his own. From what he's told me, she didn't take this lightly. So our son's ex has now been pressed with charges, and we are awaiting further information. Like some of you pointed out, it's a sufficient amount and she's been pressed with criminal charges. Our bank has also been informed, and we are told we'll likely get our money back. She blew up on the entire family, but no one but our daughter-in-law is taking her side. Other daughter-in-law is a whole story, for another time perhaps, but we are now glad to officially announce that we are thief-free in the family. We appreciate all your feedback, advice, and engagement." I still found like the son's reaction really strange in this one. I know that he was apparently sort of told a different side of the story, but if like a partner came up to me and, you know, it said in this one, his girlfriend had apparently told him that the parents wanted to spoil her as future daughter-in-law, I'd be thinking, hold up, my parents want to do what? Even if it was 3,000 to 5,000, that's a hell of a lot of money to want to just randomly spoil someone. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments on this one, and let's move on to another story. And our next story comes from A Little Spice, who says, "Am I the a-hole for ruining my friend's gender reveal? My 27 female friend, 29 female, is pregnant. She wanted to do a gender reveal, so at a 20-week ultrasound, she got the ultrasound technician to write the gender on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, and gave it to me. She wanted me to order those smoke cannons for her, her husband, and their kids to pop out at a photograph session to reveal what their new baby is going to be. Personally, I don't see the point in them, but it made my friend happy, and I felt honored that she trusted me with such a secret. When she handed me the envelope, she made me swear that under no circumstances I would tell her what it is, no matter how much she begged, or tell anyone else, and I agreed. Fast forward, I've had this envelope for 2 weeks now. I've ordered the cannons and the gender reveal is in a few days. For the past 2 weeks, my friend has hounded me with texts begging me to just tell her what it is, but then following up with, actually, no, I don't want to know. And it's just been going back and forth like that. The texts were annoying, but I just ignored it and understood she was just excited. For the past 3 days, she's begun hounding me at work. I work in the office job and I'm in and out of meetings all day. After the first day of a call into my work, I asked her to please just chill out and stop calling me at work. I reminded her that she made me promise not to tell and she'd find out soon enough. Here is where I may be the a-hole. I've been having a crappy day at work with a particular client being a giant, and I'm assuming that's pain in the backside. I was stuck in a meeting with this client and the receptionist stuck her head in and said I had an urgent phone call. Thought it may have been my kid's school, so I excused myself and took the call. It was my friend, again. I just snapped and told her if she wanted to know so badly, it's a boy, and then I hung up the phone. My husband thinks I'm in the right because there is only so much one person can take, but our mutual friends are calling me the a-hole because I should have just kept my mouth shut. So, am I the a-hole? Edit 1. I've seen a few people concerned about these cannons. These aren't the same type that have caused devastation and loss of life by causing fires. They are pressurized with air and powder inside them, in non-flammable, so they don't pose any fire hazard. But I completely understand and appreciate people's concern. And OP does give us a little update in the same post in a moment. Wow, there's only so much you can take of that. And you're not the a-hole to me in this situation. She phoned you several times, she was texting you, and then finally calls you at work, calls a receptionist, tells you it's an emergency, interrupts a work meeting. Yes, I'd get very fed up with that very, very quickly too. But can you imagine the face on the other end of that phone when OP just revealed it like that and then hung up? That'd be like, oh, sugar. But Ms. Jamie Farr says, not the a-hole. She called your work phone and interrupted the receptionist and a business meeting. That is where she crossed the line fully. Not that she hadn't already with the many calls. You needed to put an end to it and you did. If she didn't want to know, she shouldn't have asked. Chief Tuck says, not the a-hole. With that extreme behavior, my question is, why you didn't hand back the envelope after the third time she demanded you tell her the gender? OP says, honestly, it's just not something I considered. I was prepared for a little badgering because that's just who she is. She's extremely impatient. So I sort of knew what I was getting into when I agreed to do this for her. But I didn't realize it would get to this extent. The texts I expected and like I said, were annoying, but I just ignored them. The calls into my work, on the other hand, were not expected and I didn't even think she would go that far. Hindsight is 2020, lol. I should have just given her back the envelope. And one more comment from Voyager who says, not the a-hole. I would have done a lot worse to anyone who yanked me out of a client meeting with a claim of urgency just to harass me about telling her something she claimed that she didn't want me to tell her. Honestly, I probably would have done something much worse earlier out of sheer frustration at her appalling behavior. She asked you to take custody of the information. She hadn't asked you to tolerate a constant harassment, nor did you agree to do so. It would have been well within your rights to hand her the envelope much earlier in her campaign of demands and tell her, here, look for yourself if you want to that much. I can't reasonably keep this for you if you're going to treat me like that when I do. Then OP gives us a small update in the same post which says, finally got one of our mutual friends to respond to me and tell me what they were told. Turns out, as another commenter had guessed, they were told a different story. My friend never mentioned the onslaught of texts begging to know or the ringing me multiple times at work. They were simply told that OP couldn't keep a secret and just had to tell me and ruin the surprise. I honestly don't know where to go from here. Since being able to tell one of the mutual friends what actually happened, she's just as peeved as I am. I haven't heard from my friend except for a text message telling me how I'm such a horrible friend and I shouldn't have told them. I haven't responded. And I kind of had a bit of a feeling in the update that something like that was going to happen, that a different story goes out from what actually happened with OP to paint themselves in a better light. But of course, instead of taking responsibility for their constant barrage of text messages and phone calls, they call you the horrible friend. Wowee. Now, what do you guys make of this situation? Do you have a different opinion on the matter? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and let's move on to another story. And our next story comes from FairMom7695, who says, am I the a-hole for letting my daughter and her husband move in with me so they won't be homeless? This situation is complicated and I'm at my wit's end. I have two daughters who are civil to each other but don't get along with each other. My eldest is married to Steve while my youngest is engaged to Adam. Steve and Adam are so different they dislike each other the first time they met. Steve works part-time because he treasures family time with my daughter. They spend their time traveling and exploring different parts of the state. He spends freely because he often says he can't take his money with him when he dies. Adam is an executive and for his side business he owns several dozen properties. He works about 80 hours a week at both jobs because his philosophy is that he wants to make as much money as possible while he's young so that he can retire early. Steve thinks Adam is a corporate shill and basically blames him for everything that's wrong with society. Steve said that Adam is actively keeping people from buying homes and making them dependent on him. Adam thinks Steve is a slacker, and I've told Steve people like him, who does the bare minimum but expects handouts, are what's wrong with society. Neither of them are bad, and they treat my daughters well. I retired last year due to my health, so Adam built a house for me so that I can live comfortably. I was able to customize everything in the house to fit my taste. Adam owns the house, pays for all the utilities, and charges me $1 a month for rent. Part of our deal is that no one else can live in the house but me. He was very clear about this. Steve recently lost his job, so he and my eldest are living off her single income. As you can imagine, they are struggling. My eldest recently called me crying because their savings are almost gone and they can't make next month's rent. She asked if she and Steve could move in with me until he finds another job. I lived on a fixed income, so I don't have money to set them up in another apartment. She's my daughter, and I couldn't let her be homeless, so I let Steve and her move in. I gave them strict rules and a time limit on when they had to move out. I didn't think my youngest and Adam would find out because they live in another state, but somehow she found out. She called and screamed at me last night for betraying Adam's trust, but I argued that I'm a mother to 2 daughters, and I can't let one be homeless. I told her about the rules and time limit and begged her not to tell Adam. She hung up on me, so I don't know what's going to happen. I know I went back on an agreement, but I had a good reason. Edit. I couldn't add many details in my original post because I was afraid of going over the character limits. Adam pays the taxes and utilities on this house, but because it's the only house he has in this state, he keeps its financials separate from the rest of his properties. Also, he doesn't really have anything to do with the house. Instead, he gave it over to my youngest to take care of, so she handles all of the bills and maintenance and pays them out of an account he set up. She noticed the increased utility costs, which is when she called. We just spoke again, and I laid my soul bare to her. I knew I was going back on our agreement, but it was to keep her sister from being homeless. We had a lengthy conversation, and in the end, she agreed not to tell Adam. She'd cover the increased utility cost out of her own pocket, so he won't notice it. In exchange, her sister and Steve will have 3 months, then we'll have to move out. I originally told them they had 6 months. I'm lucky to have such a compassionate daughter. Thank you for taking the time to read my post. Some of the comments were very hurtful, but some were helpful. It made me realize I should have called my youngest at the start and asked. That would have saved a lot of tears. It kind of felt from the start that Adam always knew something like this was going to happen, and that's why the rule was there in the first place. And of course, I totally understand not wanting to see your child go homeless. Who would want to see that? No one. But keeping this a secret originally was a bad move. Asking your daughter to keep this a secret from Adam is a bad move. If Adam finds out, you could be potentially or likely damaging their relationship too. It just doesn't sit well with me, but Epitome says, you're the a-hole, Steve doesn't like Adam, calls him a shill, blames him for society's problems he isn't even responsible for, but has no problem living in a house built by the very guy he dislikes. Steve is a hypocrite. You agreed to a rule and broke it. You and your family are taking advantage of Adam's generosity for you. That is low. It's not Adam's problem Steve is jealous of him having loads of money, isn't in debt and can afford the finer things in life because he chose to work full time so he can retire early. Meanwhile, Steve is in debt, lost his place, can't afford rent, blew his money on traveling, which isn't necessary considering their financial situation. Steve dislikes Adam but thinks he's entitled to his hard work. How can he have money for traveling, etc., but not set aside money for future rent, etc.? We all know Steve will mock Adam about the house. We all know Steve and your daughter won't move out when he gets a job because he'll want to rub it in Adam's face, behind his back, that he lives in a house built by Adam and Adam has no clue that his new family went behind his back to the guy who dislikes him. Simply for his work ethic. The update part, you manipulated your daughter into lying and going behind her partner's back. I hope he finds out. I hope he ends things with your daughter. I hope he forces you lot out because you lot took advantage of him. You potentially effed your daughter's relationship over, or because you have a favorite guy. Equivalent Collar says, you're the a-hole. I'm sorry, but Adam is doing you a favor by letting you live in his house, and he gave you one rule, so he's not taken advantage of. Not only did you break this rule, but you did so by allowing the person who insults Adam to live there. Your daughter and her husband want to live by the values they have, fair enough, but they need to be able to have money to back that up. If by Steve losing his part-time job they are in this much trouble, then they didn't have the money to spend freely and go traveling to begin with. Yeah, you have 2 daughters, but at the end of the day, the person who owns the house has no obligation to house your daughter and her husband, and honestly you. So if you lose your home because of this, then you only have yourself to blame. Independent Idea says you're the a-hole. I'd say you were going for the better to all forgiveness then permission type, but you didn't even plan on telling Adam. Given how you describe Steve, I'm betting they won't be out by X date. ETA, I have a feeling Adam set that condition because he saw this coming. Edit, based on OP's edit on how many people think Steve and sister will be out in 3 months. I predict we see youngest post in 3 months. Am I the a-hole for not telling my husband that my sister and brother-in-law moved in with my mum? Because hiding big things like this from your future husband totally never turns out bad, right? Now, what do you guys make of this situation? I personally just cannot see this one ending well for the way that they basically asked the daughter to lie to her husband Adam, who owns the house. I cannot see that ending well at all, like that last post said about, seeing another post down the line. Very possible, right? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support and time always means the absolute world to me, so thank you so much for being involved, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Take care and much love.